Germany in the 90s wasn't exactly a breeding ground for vampires. But don't tell that to Daniel and Manuela Ruda. He was a blood-drinking black metal fan with a flair for theatrics, and she was a goth-turned-vampire enthusiast who blacked out her windows and slept in a coffin. Romantic, right? But when these two met, their shared love of darkness turned into something more dangerous than matching outfits and bad eyeliner. Their story is one of blood rituals, satanic visions, and a personal ad that could have been ripped straight out of a creepy gothic Craigslist. But what happens when a couple's obsession with eternal damnation leads them to believe murder is their ticket to hell's VIP lounge? That's where things get messy. But before we get into that story, if you like your true crime brief and bingeable, you have found the right podcast. Tap the follow button now to access at least 2 episodes per week. Welcome to 10-Minute Murder. Manuela Bartel was the kind of kid who made her parents breathe a sigh of relief. Polite, hardworking, and bright. Growing up in the 80s and 90s Germany, her life followed the well-worn path of a typical small-town upbringing. Good grades, plenty of friends, and really no trouble to speak of. But then adolescence came knocking, and Manuela didn't just slam the door on her childhood innocence, she torched it. For most parents, teenage years mean a few slammed doors, some questionable outfits, and a curfew rebellion or two. But Manuela, she leveled up. Her mood swings weren't just emotional, they were physical. Manuela's fits of rage were explosive, sometimes spilling out into the streets, where her behavior turned bizarre and terrifying. Biting strangers was just another Tuesday for her. Her baffled parents turned to psychiatrists, hoping for answers. But therapy sessions, evaluations, and even desperate prayers yielded nothing. No one could pinpoint why their once sweet daughter had morphed into something so unrecognizable. And then it got worse, much worse. Manuela Bartel's spiral from promising student to self-proclaimed vampire was anything but subtle. It began with her skipping school and swapping her typical teenage wardrobe for the dramatic blacks and heavy eyeliner of gothic fashion. Her parents, bewildered by her transformation, didn't see the next twist coming. At just 16, Manuela packed her things and vanished. Not to a friend's house or a nearby town, but across the channel to London. London, with its sprawling subcultures, welcomed Manuela like a moth to its dark, flickering flame. She found work at a gothic nightclub in Islington, a place where her new aesthetic wasn't just accepted, it was celebrated. But this wasn't just about fashion or music for Manuela. Her immersion into the gothic scene opened the door to something far darker. At the club, she mingled with a crowd that didn't stop at black lipstick and devil horns for Halloween. They embraced the occult, worshipped Satan, and shared a taste for blood. Literally. Manuela would later describe how she and other self-identified vampires drank the blood of willing donors during their macabre gatherings. It was thrilling, intoxicating even, to feel connected to this dark, forbidden community. But for Manuela, it still wasn't enough. Craving something deeper, or perhaps darker, Manuela left London for Scotland. Her behavior became increasingly extreme, sleeping on graves, performing occult rituals, and at one point being buried alive. In her own words, she claimed to have sold her soul to Satan, completing her transformation from rebellious teen to a figure who had abandoned all semblance of her former self. When Manuela Bartel resurfaced in Germany, she wasn't just a rebellious teen anymore. She was a living, breathing gothic archetype, straight out of a nightmare. By then, her connection to daylight had vanished entirely. She blacked out her apartment windows, transformed her sleep routine to match her nocturnal habits, and chose a coffin as her bed of choice. Subtlety, it seems, had left the building. Her transformation didn't stop at lifestyle changes. Manuela went under the needle, shaving part of her head to make space for a tattoo of an inverted crucifix. A bold declaration for her allegiance to the dark. But even that wasn't enough to complete her evolution. To truly embody the vampire image she craved, Manuela underwent dental modification, replacing 2 of her teeth with sharp animal fangs. At this point, Manuela wasn't just living the gothic lifestyle, she was sculpting herself into its extreme embodiment, becoming a figure that blurred the line between reality and horror fiction. Her return to Germany marked the final phase of her metamorphosis and set the stage for a dark chapter that would shock the world. Back in Germany, her life took another sharp turn. This time, it was sparked by a personal ad buried in the pages of a magazine catering to gothic, delusioned youth. The ad was brief, yet it spoke directly to her morbid sensibilities. Vampire seeks princess of darkness who hates everybody and everything. It was essentially a Lonely Hearts ad, wrapped in black velvet and nihilism. But for Manuela, it was an invitation she could not resist. Responding to that ad would change the trajectory of her life forever, setting her on a path of destruction she could never undo. Experts who later dissected their story often speculated that, had they been left to their own devices, Manuela and the man she was about to meet might have eventually outgrown their gothic obsessions. Adolescence and identity crisis fade, after all, but life doesn't often give people such neat endings. Manuela answered the ad and met Daniel Ruda. Together they would form a duo that would drag their shared fantasies into horrifying reality, ensuring that neither would escape the darkness they had embraced. Daniel Ruda grew up isolated and angry, never fitting in and recoiling from even basic human connections. In search of purpose, he first turned to neo-Nazism, finding fleeting camaraderie during the 1998 general election. Disillusioned by the movement's failure, he abandoned it and dove into Germany's gothic and black metal scene. In this dark subculture, Daniel embraced blood-drinking rituals and followed his favorite band, blood-sucking freaks, across the country. But even this macabre community couldn't satisfy him. Desperate for deeper meaning, he placed that personal ad, Vampire seeks princess of darkness who hates everybody and everything. Manuela answered, setting the stage for their deadly partnership. Daniel and Manuela's connection was instant and disturbing. They fully embraced their shared obsession with darkness and the occult, creating a life together where Daniel worked a mundane job day to day, and Manuela lived out her vampiric fantasies in their lightless apartment, complete with a coffin bed. Their delusion escalated when Daniel claimed to receive a satanic vision. They were to marry on June 6th and die on July 6th to earn eternal seats beside Satan. But first, they needed a sacrifice. For Daniel and Manuela, the question wasn't whether to kill, it was who to choose. That decision would soon seal their fate. For Daniel and Manuela, their satanic devotion required one final act, a blood sacrifice. Manuela's isolated lifestyle meant few potential victims, so the couple turned to someone they both knew, Frank Hagen. Frank, a kind and open-minded colleague of Daniel's, had met Manuela and didn't judge their eccentric lifestyle. But his good nature made him the perfect choice in their twisted logic. Frank's humor and personality led them to label him as Satan's future court jester. In their eyes, Frank wasn't just a victim, he was the key to their eternity in hell. On July 6th, Frank arrived at Daniel and Manuela's apartment, expecting a casual evening with friends. Instead, he walked into a trap. While they sat on the sofa, Daniel struck Frank twice with a hammer. Disoriented but still alive, Frank stumbled toward the television, only to be met with Manuela's blade. Convinced she was following a divine order, she stabbed Frank 66 times. The depravity didn't stop there. They carved a pentagram into his stomach, drank his blood, and completed their ritual by having sex beside his body, in Manuela's coffin. Frank's death wasn't just a sacrifice, it was a horrifying descent into their delusions. With Frank's blood spilled, the couple believed their mission was nearly complete. All that remained was their departure from this mortal world, sealing their pact with Satan. Initially, they planned to slit their wrists, but the thought of staging a fatal accident with a truck crossed their minds. For unknown reasons, neither plan materialized. Instead, Daniel and Manuela fled. Their disappearance might have gone unnoticed, but Manuela sent a goodbye letter to her parents. Alarmed, her family contacted the authorities. When police arrived for a welfare check, they discovered a scene straight out of a horror movie. Frank's mutilated body was decomposing in the apartment, the scalpel still protruding from his stomach. A nationwide manhunt quickly ensued, and the couple was apprehended on July 12th in another city. Daniel initially claimed he had no memory of the murder, but Manuela was more forthcoming. She laid out the details with chilling matter-of-factness, openly explaining the ritual and their belief that the act was an order from Satan. "I got the order to sacrifice a human for Satan," Daniel declared during his statement. Manuela echoed the sentiment. "It was not murder. We are not murderers. It was the execution of an order." What followed would be one of the most bizarre and unsettling murder trials in modern German history. The trial of Daniel and Manuela Ruda was less about legal proceedings and more about theater, a twisted gothic performance that horrified and fascinated onlookers with equal measure. Dressed in their signature gothic attire, the couple turned the courtroom into a stage for their macabre beliefs. They shared passionate kisses in front of the cameras, flashed satanic hand gestures, and seemed to revel in the chaos that they had created. Manuela even requested that the courtroom windows be blacked out, claiming the sunlight hurt her eyes. While the judge denied this bizarre request, she was permitted to wear sunglasses throughout the trial, further adding to the surreal atmosphere. Never one to shy away from the spotlight, Daniel took the stand with an argument that left the courtroom stunned. Comparing himself to a car involved in an accident, he declared, "If I kill a person with a car and half his bleeding head is hanging on the radiator grill, the car is not put on trial. The driver is the bad one. I have no reason to regret anything because I have not done anything." His statement underscored the couple's shared belief that they were mere instruments of Satan, absolved of personal responsibility by the supposed divine order they claimed to follow. Despite their theatrics and pleas for leniency on the grounds of mental disturbance, the judge saw through their facade, though not without some measure of compromise. Daniel was sentenced to 15 years and Manuela received 13, both to be served in the psychiatric unit of a prison. The court also forbade them from ever seeing each other again. Their bond, which had brought them together in the name of darkness, dissolved shortly after the trial, culminating in a divorce. In the years that followed, Daniel remained defiant. He penned a book about the murder, a move that not only shocked the public but ensured his request for early release would be denied. To this day, Daniel remains behind bars, refusing to participate in therapy sessions, a requirement for his potential release. Manuela, on the other hand, appears to have taken a different path. She engaged in therapy, reportedly coming to terms with the gravity of her actions. After serving her sentence, she was released. Her current whereabouts are unknown. That's 10-Minute Murder for today. Brief and bingeable true crime. I'm Joe, I'm the host, and thank you for taking the time to listen. And I don't know what got me in the vampire mood, and it wasn't necessarily me. I don't want to take full blame. You guys are the ones that request these different topics for the episodes. I happen to put two vampire episodes pretty close to each other because I've done the Richard Chase, The Vampire of Sacramento. I did that one pretty recently, and now this one. That's my bad. I should have spaced out the vampire episodes. And again, thanks for listening. If you're a brand new listener, make sure you hit subscribe wherever you're listening right now. Follow on social media and go to my website, get all the information about the podcast, 10minutemurder.com. And this has been an ongoing theme over the years of doing this podcast. For some reason, people want to know, Joe, what's bothering you right now? What's something you want to get off your chest? What's a pet peeve of yours? Something along those lines. And I don't know why people want to know this about me, but I do get occasional emails, so I'll tell you what's bothering me at the moment. I'm sick of logging in. All these different devices, all these different places where you go to do the things on the internet, you have to log in all the time. I'm so sick of logging in. And create a password? Bro, I'm out of passwords. I don't have another password in me. Maybe you have a job where you have to create a login and a password, and then that password has to be changed every 60, 30, 90 days, whatever it is. I am so out of passwords. I don't know what to tell you. Like, what else do you want me to talk about? Like, I should start looking around the room sometimes, like pocket lint 12. Like, that's not a real password of mine, for the record. But, like, that's what I'm doing at this point. Like, I don't even know what to do for passwords. Leave me alone. Whoever invented the face technology where the device will recognize your face to log you in, I want to kiss you on the mouth because that is a lifesaver for me. If I had to enter a password every time I needed to get in my phone, I would never use my phone. Okay, I'm going to hush because this episode's getting long, but don't forget to check out my other podcast, 10 Minute Mystery. Same vibes as this one, just no murders. Again, thank you so much for listening to 10 Minute Murder.